Hi, welcome to everybody this morning. And yes, we are going to be doing something a little bit different for the next few minutes. I have worked for the last 15 years helping adults and adolescents with mental and emotional difficulty and suffering, many of which also struggle with physical difficulty too. I've had performance anxiety for all of my adult life. Standing in front of a group of people is incredibly difficult. And I always use my Fitbit here just to remind me as to how I'm doing today. My normal resting heartbeat is 56 beats per minute, and I'm currently on 162, which is fat burn. So you will be watching me lose a stone in weight over the next half an hour, and I kid you not. Now, the reason for mentioning that is not so that you guys sit there and just think, oh, for goodness sake, we're really suffering, and for goodness sake, you have performance anxiety. We don't care. That's fine. The reason I mention it is for the first 10 years of doing my job, I avoided doing any public speaking because I was waiting until I was ready. And what I've learned is that if we wait until we're ready before we do something or take something seriously, then we never, ever do it. So the reason I stand up here today in front of you is not because I've got rid of my fear. I haven't got rid of my anxiety. My mind still tells me that all of you are sitting there thinking, what is that old woman doing talking to us about stuff that really doesn't matter? My mind still tells me that you're bored already and you're thinking about what you're going to have for dinner. That stuff hasn't gone. It's here with me. And I guess the reason for mentioning it is that very often we don't take our mental health seriously. And we don't take self-compassion seriously because we wait until the conditions are perfect, until our children have left home, until we've finished our treatment, until another year has passed. We wait and we wait and we wait. And if we wait until we're ready, I promise everybody in this room that you will never be ready to take your mental health seriously. And in fact, as a nation, we only take mental health seriously when something goes really wrong. So I'm going to use my dobber, except it's not my dobber, it's someone else's, so I'm going to assume down. Okay. So today we're going to talk a little bit about self-compassion. And the speaker before me was talking about lots of scientific evidence. And if any of you are interested in the empirical evidence around self-compassion, please do come and find me afterwards, and I will send you the reams of it. But for now, we're going to talk a little bit about whether or not you guys can actually prioritize yourself. When I do values work with a group of adults, we do an exercise with them, and we ask them who or what really matters to you in your life. And it's so rare that somebody answers that question with me. I matter. What comes up is my kids matter, getting well matter, friends matter. But very, very rarely do I have somebody who answers that question with I matter. I really matter. And it's important that you matter because the research shows us that the comorbidity factors around a cancer diagnosis and treatment are that a majority of you will struggle with your mental health. It's really unfair, isn't it? Along with the physical problems that you have too. Anxiety and depression with a cancer diagnosis being the most common. Of course, the reality is that actually the only thing that we all have in common in this room is that we all struggle, that we are all, as human beings, naturally vulnerable. Essentially, we are all a little bit broken. And tapping into that shared vulnerability, not in this room, but in our society and in our planet too, is actually really important. So what does self-compassion actually really mean? Self-compassion means acknowledging suffering and doing something to alleviate it. That's the difference between kindness and compassion. Kindness is when we see struggle and we maybe use our skills of empathy or sympathy with an individual who's struggling. But compassion is seeing difficulty and doing something to alleviate it. That's the difference between the two. Sounds really easy, doesn't it? Doesn't it sound easy to see suffering and then to do something to help alleviate it? But what we know is that for those individuals who are suffering with a cancer diagnosis and for those individuals who are around them, trying to do the best they can to support them, that actually we become a little bit meaner to ourselves rather than a little bit kinder to ourselves. And what the research shows us is actually we beat ourselves up more when we're struggling with our physical health than we do if we're not. And there are lots of reasons for that. Self-compassion to me is speaking to myself in a way that I would speak to my best friend or to one of my children. But sometimes it's not what I say to myself. Sometimes it's the tone I use when I say it. So when I came up here and had that thought, you all think I'm a little bit dim and I've got nothing actually valuable to share with you. That wasn't said in a lovely, compassionate voice. That was the typical voice that has been inside my head for all of my adult life. It was actually quite mean. And in fact, if I'm being honest, it sounded a little bit like my mother. But don't tell her. So very often what we see is the bit that kind of pokes above the surface. We may see how cancer or a cancer diagnosis actually affects us physically. But what we know, of course, is that there are many, many layers of suffering. And many of those are invisible. Invisible to ourselves and invisible to others. And it's interesting looking at the research around individuals living with cancer, that actually it's often at the end of their treatment where they have what we call a false summit. It's a little bit like when you're on the M25 and you stop and you're thinking, why have we all stopped? And then all of a sudden you go and the roads are clear and you think, what was that all about? It's very often that the emotional cost of a cancer diagnosis actually only really hits the person at the end of their treatment, not during it. Because then there is a kind of realization. It's almost as though we live in a little bit in denial whilst we're undergoing the treatment, and then the evidence shows us that this false summit is very real for a majority of individuals living with cancer, not just for a few. And we were talking on our table there that, of course, what doesn't help is that when we say to each other as human beings, how are you? What most of us reply is, we're fine. So this is a lot about the hidden world. And although I can't stand here and talk with wonderful diagrams showing all of this sort of empirical up and down, what I can say is that there is a lot of research on the role of self-compassion in you living lives well with cancer. You're coping with the burden versus the benefit of your treatment. You're coping with the decision making. You're also coping with changed bodies too. Learning to be alongside things that were different than they were before. And often a lot of you talk, when I was here at conference last time, a lot of you talked about how it is a balancing act, how I can remain as being the best person that I am, but also being a mother and being a friend. And it's hard to balance all of those elements. But actually the psychological costs of a cancer diagnosis are also profound. The adjustment, and very often the loss. We often think of loss as being through death and dying, whereas actually we know that some of the most difficult losses for us are around our concept of who we are, what we are capable of. And for some of you, there will be a fear that accompanies that thinking about the future. So those losses, remember that. Those losses, you will experience the same grief process as you will do as if somebody had died. And it's in those moments that self-compassion is really important. To me, the biggest one from what I heard at conference last year, and I've even just gathered this morning from sitting with a few of you, is the bottom one. Living with uncertainty. I cannot imagine what it must be like when you listen to a lot of these medical people talk about the fact that we're not really sure. That must be incredibly difficult to sit with the uncertainty that accompanies the future. There's a lot of research recently around the language of cancer too, and I don't know if any of you can empathize with this, but we do tend to present this as being a bit of a battle. Can anybody empathize with this? And we talk about how cancer is about being a warrior and approaching this with courage and being brave. And we actually know that this language can be a real barrier to us being compassionate towards ourselves. In particular, the third one down, something we can beat with willpower. I don't know how that lands with any of you. I don't have cancer, but I find this language quite offensive. And from working with a number of people who are living with cancer and with a lot of adolescents who are living with parents with cancer, it can lead to us suppressing fear. So this talk is not about positive psychology, about come on guys, dig deep, be brave, we can beat this, we can battle this. It's got nothing to do with that. In fact, it's got the complete opposite. It's actually how can we struggle well, not avoid it. It's how can we actually struggle and be with it. So you won't be hearing any of that language from me, you'll be pleased to hear. And I wish that I had a certainty button that I could press. Something that I use a lot in therapy is this concept of the facts are always friendly. In other words, what we know we can actually deal with. It's the bit that we don't know that we really struggle with. So I wish there was a certainty button, but I haven't got one today. I wish I had. And we don't really take mental health seriously. In fact, a very large study recently showed that 60% of individuals who've had a recent cancer diagnosis have been given absolutely no information on mental health after their diagnosis, none. And in actual fact, surveys show us that a majority of you would like access to a peer support group. A lot of you would like access to one-on-one counselling. 60% of you would like to have better communication with your healthcare provider. And almost all of you would like as much information as possible, however terrifying it is. But it's interesting with mental health is that we don't really take it seriously. We take our physical health seriously, but not our mental health. And we kind of understand the concept, don't we, of physical health. I go to the gym, I push through heavy weights. The more weights, the heavier the weight, the bigger my muscles get, the stronger I become. And yet we don't use that analogy with mental health. We avoid lifting difficult emotional weights. That's what we do as human beings. If I go to a yoga class, I just have to say that my yoga teacher the other day said that I reminded him of an ironing board when I tried to do any of the yoga moves. I'm that inflexible. But I go, and the more I go to yoga, the more flexible I get. And if I wake up the following morning and I ache all over, what do I say to myself? I say, Rachel, you nailed that because you hurt. You're hurting today, which means you must have done it right. And yet we take the opposite view when it comes to our mental and our emotional health. We avoid it, often at all costs. And we know that that is where mental health problems become real difficulty. Avoiding unhappiness is not the same as being happy. In order to live a valued life, we need to be willing to embrace all of the full range of 42 human emotions, not just happiness. We need to be willing to embrace and accept the full range. And what are most of the feelings that we don't really want to experience? And I'm exactly the same as you guys. I don't want to experience depression, sadness, anger, frustration, cravings, self-loathing, disgust. I don't want to experience any of those. And as human beings, we can be incredibly resourceful and creative in trying to manipulate and control this stuff. And what we know is that when we put our energy into that, we're not putting our energy into healing. And that's where you guys in this room really need to be. We can't expect always other people to have the answer. We also need to learn how to tap into our own resources, because if you haven't got your mental health, then we know that your ability to relate skillfully to your physical difficulty will be diminished hugely. So why aren't we all kind to ourselves? Why do I speak to myself in the tone of my mother? Why do we not just see our own suffering and respond really compassionately towards it? Well, there are many, many barriers to self-compassion. The first one is that often we struggle to like ourselves enough to take it seriously. It's interesting, the research shows us that when we're struggling physically with a cancer diagnosis, there is a part of us that actually doesn't like the version of ourselves. Even though we're struggling more and we need more self-compassion, it can often be where our self-critic comes out to play. You should be doing better. Everybody else is doing better than you. You're letting your children down. Our self-critic can come out, and that can be really difficult. So very often we don't do it because we don't think we deserve it. Another reason that we don't do it is that we experience an overwhelming emotion, such as sadness, such as fear, and very often such as anger, okay? And sometimes that emotion can actually become a part of us. It can almost become toxic within our bodies. And often we don't do it because we think it's a load of old nonsense. Self-love, self-compassion, what's that all about? So that can be a barrier too. And some people see it as very wishy-washy. And they see the idea of self-love and self-compassion and how we speak to ourselves as being a little bit weak, kind of cutting yourself a bit of slack. But actually, Christina Neff, who's a psychiatrist in America who's done all the research on this and a huge study on this, actually the biggest barrier to self-compassion is that we actually believe that our self-critic, that part of our brain that kind of tells us off and speaks to us in an unkind way, they actually believe that that part is essential, that's the person that keeps me on track. I need my self-critic. I need to be able to know that I'm out of order, that I need to do more to try and motivate me. But we actually know that our self-critic doesn't motivate us. The self-critic is actually the one that leads us away from a valued path, not keeps us on one. There are 3 components to self-compassion. I'm just going to whistle through them now. And those are self-kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness. And I'm just going to skip through them. And I've done something for you that I'm going to send to all of you on email afterwards, which is some ideas about how you can put this stuff into practice. We know that with physical pain, often what comes with it is layers and layers and layers of rumination, unhelpful thinking, overthinking, catastrophic thinking. Can any of you empathize with that? How our minds are like chattering monkeys, and before we know it, we've had one thought, and it's led to about 50,000 others. That's the number of thoughts you have per day. 50,000 thoughts. You make 35,000 decisions. And a lot of people take their thoughts as being facts, whereas actually most of our thoughts are unhelpful. And most of them are unkind too. So the suffering bit, the fact that we don't know when our minds have gone somewhere that isn't helpful. And we also don't know how to bring our minds back when they have. That's the suffering element. So self-kindness is important because before we know it, we can actually implode inside our brains. It's very hard to befriend our brains, especially the self-critical part of that. And we can have a shattered sense of who we are, who we were, and who we're going to be. We have a sense that actually we are broken and we're not going to be able to get back to where we were. So very often it's a feeling of being lost or feeling lost. So the way you speak to yourself matters far more than anything anybody can actually say to you. We know that the language that you choose to speak to yourself in has a far more profound impact on your mental health than anything anyone else can say to you. We bully ourselves. Often, we use unkind language, and often the way that we speak to ourselves can be profoundly unhelpful. Whereas in actual fact, that self-critic that we all have inside of our brains, that's actually the bit that needs the most self-care. Living with cancer is an opportunity to get to know yourself well, but it's also an opportunity to try and improve the relationship that you have with yourself, because your mental health really matters. And we know that your mental health is going to struggle. It makes sense when you're living in physical pain. So I'm going to send you some exercises if you notice, and I don't know if any of you here, I've spoken to a couple of people this morning, and I can already identify just from talking to them that there are some stories that they tune into inside of their minds very often. I don't know if any of you can think of those stories that sometimes you might tune into inside your mind. Kind of try and think of your brain a little bit as a radio with lots of different stations available to you to tune into, lots of different frequencies. And radio doom and gloom can be one of them. Or radio, I'm not doing as well as I should be. That might be a station that you tune into your heads that is too often than is good for you. Okay? So this isn't about getting rid of those unhelpful thoughts. This is about knowing when you are hooked on one of these stories and it's actually having a profound impact on your mental and emotional well-being. So self-criticism asks, am I good enough? Self-compassion asks, actually, what is good for me in this moment of suffering? And I'm going to share with all of you some evidence-based scientific research on some small steps that each of you might take to improve that relationship with yourself. The common humanity element of self-compassion, I'm wondering if you could all just look around the room at each other. Look behind you and to the sides and look at all of the individuals in this room. Take a look. This is such an incredible community here. And you are all brought together in the face of adversity. And it must be lovely, this conference, to be alongside those individuals with that shared sense of vulnerability. But I also know it's a very scary place for a lot of you too. I know that a lot of fear shows up and a lot of sadness shows up. And when you leave here and you're sitting in your room on your own and you feel alone with your suffering, I want you to just close your eyes and tap into the other individuals that you saw sitting in this room today, just to remind yourselves that you are part of something bigger. Because we know that despite lots of friends and family, loneliness, a subjective feeling of being alone in our suffering, can be incredibly difficult to endure. So the common humanity bit is just to remind all of us that we all struggle. Being human means being vulnerable. We can't help that. We can't control that. The mindfulness bit. To me, mindfulness just means mind and body in the same place at the same time. And that's a real challenge for you guys, because your mind is going to constantly go to your future. Would you agree with that? It's constantly your eyes are somewhere else and your mind follows. Does that make sense? Actually being present in the present moment is actually really difficult when we're struggling. So to me, mindfulness is just mind and body in the same place at the same time. How many people's minds are on Love Island as we sit here now talking? Oh, I love that. A grimace. There'll be a couple of people here. There we go. How many people's minds are actually thinking, what am I going to eat for dinner? Or what time's break? And I could do with a biscuit. Exactly. How difficult it is to pay attention. And what we know is that we can survive almost anything in the present. What we find harder to survive is when our minds go raking over the past or projecting ourselves into the future. So it's really important that you guys know how to bring your attention back if you're spending too much time with your mind in a different place to where your body is. And just want you to remember that the emotions that you experience, you cannot control any of them, nor can you control your thinking minds unless you take hallucinogenic drugs. Then you can, but that's only short term. Okay? You can. I'm seeing a few knowing nods there. I'm a bit concerned. So I just want you to remember you cannot control your emotional weather. Okay? Every single emotion that comes to visit you is there for a reason. It brings a message with it. If there's anger there, frustration, self-doubt, every single emotion that comes and visits your body has a message for you. What most of us do is to try and avoid it or suppress it or manipulate it or control it. But what we know is that when an emotion shows up, if we just take one small step and actually say to somebody, I'm feeling this, that actually tames the resonance and poignancy of that emotion. Too many of us are walking around with an emotion for longer than it should be in our bodies. An emotion should last for 2 minutes. Okay? Once we've read the message, we let it pass. Emotions and thoughts, the trick here is to let them pass, not cling to them. We often cling to our emotions so that they become a toxic part of us. We describe somebody as being angry or somebody as being sad. That's nonsense. They're not their emotions and they're not their thoughts, which I'm really pleased about, that we're not our thoughts. So I just ask you to think about, do you put enough energy into being able to put your mind and body in the same place at the same time? Because a wandering mind, when you're suffering with cancer, is an unhappy mind, okay? It's an anxious mind. So knowing how to live in the present is actually a really important skill, but it takes practice. It can be confusing too, of course, because emotions are just energy in motion. That's all an emotion is. The difference between an emotion and a feeling is awareness. A lot of you are not, because we're human beings, aware as to the emotional state that we are in, because we think we need to be brave for our children or for our spouses or for our partners or for our friends. Whereas in actual fact, we need to learn to be a little bit more curious about the emotions that they show up, because they are energy in motion. They are physical. That's all an emotion is a set of physical changes. That's all an emotion is. They're physical. It starts in the body and then it goes to the mind. So if we can learn how to calm our bodies, we also then learn how to calm our minds. And some of the exercises I'll be sending you are around how can we calm our bodies to support our minds in adversity. And very quickly, I've given you all a little finger trap on your table if you'd like to grab your little finger trap. And I was saying earlier, please grab one. Take one. And as I was saying earlier, I work in primary schools sometimes, and I have had on 2 occasions little boys take these into the cubicles and put their willies in them. and the really sad thing is that is absolutely true. So I just want you to insert your 2 fingers into the end of your finger trap, and I want you to pull outwards. And I want you to notice what happens when we struggle with a finger trap on our fingers. What do you notice? Tightens, okay? And this is a metaphor for how we respond to our emotions. The more we struggle with them, guess what? The bigger hold they have on us, the more they steer us away from leading a valued life. So how do you get your fingers out of a finger trap? You lean in, push them back in. So although it's just a silly Chinese finger trap, to me the metaphor is really important. We need to know how to be still with our emotions. Too many of us are fighting with our emotions because we're not willing to have them. Whereas if we can lean into our emotions and be more curious about our internal worlds, then actually the emotion is able to come and pass. Values really matter here. The only reason I can stand up in front of you with 162 beats per minute is because actually mental health really matters to me as a person. Values are really important when we're struggling with cancer. What kind of life do you want to live? Who or what really matters to you in your life? And if there's a group of you that want to do it, I'm here tomorrow morning. I've got a lovely values exercise that you can take away with you too that asks you the question, for the life that you have now, what do you want to stand for on this planet? What things really matter to you? Not what's the matter. We ask you far too often, what's the matter? The question that elicits a different answer is what matters. Because if you know what matters to you in your life, you are going to be far more willing to accept the difficult thoughts and emotions that accompany that. And very often, that man makes me feel a bit sick in that bath, by the way, but if it was Marmite, it wouldn't make me feel sick, but I think it's Nutella. We often think of self-compassion as lying in a bath of chocolate with candles and, putting rose petals on our bed and doing things, that are just, eating 4 bags of crisps, having 4 glasses of wine because we need it. Self-compassion has got nothing to do with that. Self-compassion, the first step of compassion is actually to acknowledge that you are suffering. And that is something that we as human beings find incredibly difficult. But actually, vulnerability is the thing that we find it the hardest to admit in ourselves. And yet, guess what? It's the one thing we search for the most in others. So vulnerability is the key to connection. And we can't be courageous unless we're willing to be vulnerable. So what are some small acts of self-compassion? Meditation and body scans, calming the body to support the mind. It starts in the body first. Values exercise, connecting with others, beautiful research on yoga, some lovely research around certain yoga poses that we know make a real difference to those individuals who are struggling with cancer. Notice when you're tuned into doom and gloom FM or I am not good enough FM in our minds, writing a self-compassion journal, which I'll send you, but also having a list of things that you can do or become engaged to when you notice that your mind and body are not in the same place at the same time. So much research has been done on posture and emotions. I won't bore you with it. But we know that the rise in adolescent depression rates are linked directly to the fact that young people are walking around staring down at their phones. And I just want you to remind you that every time we diminish our bodies, we close that link between our minds and our bodies, and we restrict oxygen going to our brains, and we send a message to our brains that we're in trouble and we're not safe. And there's a lovely bit of evidence that's just been published about those individuals who have recovered from cancer, that actually their posture is more inward looking after treatment than it was before. So we carry this stuff with us. So posture has a profound impact on our emotions in the same way as our emotions have a profound impact on our posture. So even just sitting further up, making sure that mind and body in the same place at the same time. And finally, vulnerability, being authentic, knowing what really matters to you. That really helps. Understanding how to be kind to yourself in moments of suffering, and how you can have the courage to be imperfect, as each and every one of us in this room are. Learning how to breathe, knowing when we need to change the way that we breathe, because every single breath that we take, we get an opportunity to start again. Every breath is a new beginning. Your breath isn't better than my breath. Yeah? It's something that we can tap into every single day, and it's free, and it happens automatically. So I'm going to send you some exercises where you can maybe adapt your breathing to become a little bit more self-compassionate. But most of all, vulnerability requires being seen. And if you think about a young baby when they come into the world, there are 4 things that they need to thrive. They need to be seen, safe, soothed, and secure. And what I noticed over the last 15 years working with people who are living with cancer, it's really, really scary. And fear is on this journey with you. Don't wait until it's gone before you take your mental health seriously. Remember, just acknowledging, just expressing the emotion when it comes, name it to tame it, has a profound impact on the length of time that it hangs around inside your body. Brené Brown and Christina Neff's research shows us that when we have a moment of real suffering, the way that we speak to ourselves has the biggest impact of all. This is a moment of suffering, that suffering is part of life. May I be kind to myself in this moment. May I give myself the compassion I need. And before I finish, I just wanted to read a poem that I'm sure many of you have heard many times, which is The Unwelcome Guest by Rumi. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness. So momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they are a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and let them in. Be grateful for whatever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. Many thanks for your time. Appreciate it. And I'll be watching to see if any of you men take that into the toilet, okay?
Let's hope not. Do we have any, I think this is much like yesterday's session, where I'm not sure whether it's thoughts or questions that anyone wants to share at all. Okay.
Hi.
Okay, thank you very much for this inspiring talk. I really enjoyed it. But I have some difficulties connecting to it. I visit these meetings as a scientist, and I'm not a patient. Not a uveal melanoma patient, at least. And I sense something quite different among this population. And that is the sense for living. And that is very, clear. So my mental health is never better than when I return to home when I visit such a conference. So this is something completely, a bit opposing to what you're telling.
Yeah.
So that's also one thing that, for example, a patient in the Netherlands always tells me, and all people who want to hear, I had to lose my eye to see what's really important in life. And finally, he's living up to his potential after he had cancer.
Absolutely, and I completely agree with that. I guess, you're a scientist, so that you know that a cancer diagnosis and living with cancer is going to create mental and emotional difficulty too. And I love what you've just said, that very often it's only when we've lost something that we actually then take a moment to connect with the valued life that we want to live. I guess the thing that I would say there is, I guess what I see is that it's a shame that we have to lose something first before we connect with what really matters to us.
That's the drama of humanity.
It is the drama of humanity. That's exactly it. That we don't ask ourselves very often what kind of life we want to lead, who or what really matters to us. So I'm not saying, that talk wasn't meant to be in any way sort of like lowering the energy in the room. I guess what it's saying is that I hope that all of you will take your mental and emotional health as seriously as you do your physical health, facing the difficulty that you do. But thank you very much. That's the expression, we don't know what we've got until it's gone. That sometimes works too. But thank you very much for that reflection.
Thank you very much.
Is there anything else? Or are you all ready for biscuits? And
Got a couple on the board.
oh, see, that instantly my critic goes, they're only saying that because they feel sorry for me. But now the doctors, and how can we educate doctors and medical people that we need compassion? It's interesting, doctors and medical people already know that if we don't develop a compassionate relationship with ourselves, that our outcomes are not as good. So they do know that. I think the bit that we're missing is that we don't teach it early enough. And I was having a conversation with a couple of ladies earlier on this morning that actually the time to do this, to explore the relationship that we have ourselves, is before that self-critic comes on board. And that self-critic is coming on board for age 9, age 10, age 11 children, which is why we have record levels of self-harming behaviours amongst adolescents in the UK. Because children in particular always think that the stuff their mind tells them is true. They mistake a thought for a fact. And if we don't understand that actually in the face of adversity, we're more likely to be meaner to each other than kinder, it's counterintuitive. Other people will be kinder to you, by the way, after your diagnosis and when you're struggling, but you won't be kinder to you. And actually the biggest single factor that's going to make a difference here is the relationship that you have with you, not the relationship that other people have with you. Does that make sense? Does that answer that? There is a lot of research. I think GPs generally, from my experience, do not mention mental health or the importance of developing a compassionate relationship with yourself when they're helping you with your cancer. Would you agree with that? And in fact, the research shows us that that is a missing piece. And that's why I'm really passionate about this particular subject. I think individuals need more help in trying to develop that more compassionate relationship. What is your heart rate now? 157. So I've lost a stone. I've lost a stone in half an hour. Thank you for sharing. Oh. But we are all, as human beings, a little bit broken. And I love the Japanese concept of being broken, kintsugi, and I saw this in action in Tokyo last year. The idea that they mend their porcelain using gold paint, and they celebrate the fact that the very fact that it's suffered, in other words, that it's cracked, actually makes it more beautiful. So we are all a little bit broken. Happiness is not a normal state for anybody in this room. It is a fleeting moment. If I asked you whether you'd rather experience joy or pain, I'm assuming you'd all say joy. But they are two sides of the same coin. We cannot have one without the other. I experience joy when I move towards somebody that really matters to me in my life, or something that really matters. I experience pain when I turn my back on it. So knowing what matters to us enables us to embrace both sides of that, not just one. Most of us just want to experience the good stuff. But the very fact that we label emotions as positive, negative, bad or good is half of the problem. There's no such thing as a good emotion or a bad emotion. They are emotions, a set of physical That's all they are, is a set of physical changes. That's all an emotion is. But if you can learn how to read it, you might begin to understand that they are clues as to what really matters to you in your life. Positive mental attitude. Nothing is less helpful to somebody living with cancer than a positive mental attitude. I have never, ever in all my days worked with somebody who said when they were feeling low, being told to cheer up helped. I have never in all my days met somebody that has found it helpful for somebody to say, and this is the biggest one for me, be grateful for what you have. Be grateful. Never in the history of mankind has that been a useful statement to somebody who is living with cancer. So positive psychology, we know it doesn't work, which is why we don't do it anymore. Yeah, if you look at mindfulness interventions, learning how to live with our critical brains, learning how to be in the present moment, which is the only bit that you guys can control. The only control that you have is this moment. You can't control what you did last week, and you definitely can't control what the future brings, but you can control whether you're going to react or respond to your internal worlds. You can choose where you choose to put your hands and your feet, but you can't control the rest. And yet we spend 80% of our lives worrying about stuff that we have done, especially with social media, because it won't let us forget it. And we worry about the stuff that is in the future. And we know that worrying and rumination is the biggest single cause of a second bout of adult depression. So we need to take it seriously. So this idea of being negative, if you had a cancer diagnosis and if you were walking around giggling all day, I would worry about you more. This isn't about, is it, saying, oh, it's okay, everything's, be vulnerable, because actually we can't have courage until we're vulnerable first. It's on the other side of vulnerability, not this side. We need to have the courage to be a little bit broken. We need to bring some honesty into the conversations. I always think that my kids won't be able to cope if I tell them when I'm really struggling, and I kind of diminish their efficacy. I don't let them in because I don't want to burden them. Whereas in actual fact, we know that the way we make deep relationships with others is by taking a risk and being vulnerable with them. Only then can we actually exploit the opportunity that vulnerability brings for us. Keep busy. The trouble with keeping busy is that it can be a distraction. And actually, the pain research shows, if any of you in this room are in pain, actually the research shows us that we need to do the opposite of what we think. We think, let's distract ourselves from the pain. Actually, what we know is that we need to look inwardly towards it, to explore the outside of that pain, to actually really learn how to be with it rather than putting our energy into getting rid of it. So the research on this is done, and it's out there, that actually the way that we respond to pain and relate to pain has got nothing to do with positivity and keeping busy. There's something else as well, by the way, and I'm just going to mention this. You're going to think I'm an alcoholic now as well as a really poor public speaker, but I'm going to tell you anyway. Sometimes when I'm really struggling and I feel really stressed, I have a glass of wine. Anybody else do that too? Or am I the only person who's... Right, okay. And then if I'm really stressing or struggling, maybe I have 2 glasses of wine. And then if I'm having a really bad day, then I have 3 glasses of wine. Well, starter for 10, yeah? And all I'm doing is that whilst that works in the moment, all I'm actually doing is rewarding my brain for the fact that I'm struggling. And I am developing a really unhealthy relationship, same as the adolescents I work with who cut, who self-harm. If every time they're feeling emotions that they're just not willing to have, if every time they do that they cut, then it's very rewarding in the short term. The brain secretes a big load of dopamine, yeah? And it says, oh, and it feels great. But actually what happens in the longer term is that we've ended up with some really unhelpful behaviors. So what happens when I don't have wine? What happens when a young person doesn't have a compass. So actually keeping busy doesn't work. Actually bringing your full attention to a task when you're tuned into gloom F&M, that does work. Do you notice the difference? You know, it's like watching Netflix for 12 hours to distract yourself from a thought or a feeling. You'll find that you cannot control thoughts or feelings. You can put all of your energy into trying, and I look forward to getting an email from one of you that says, I managed it. You can't control them. They're not there for controlling. Okay? You can't control what your mind chucks at you, but you can learn how to turn the volume down. You can't get rid of it, but you can learn how to switch stations. If I'm listening to Radio 5 and you're listening to Radio 1, they're both available. Just because I'm listening to one doesn't mean that yours isn't there. But what I choose to shine the spotlight of my awareness on will have the biggest impact on my recovery and my well-being. So how can we, when we're struggling, shine the spotlight of our awareness on something else that doesn't get rid of the thoughts or the emotions, but just allows us to take a short and compassionate break from them?